All right, welcome back to the program and thank you so much for joining us. Of course, this evening we'll be looking at Kenya's offer to lead the operation in Haiti by deploying 1,000 of its police officers, and of course this received approval by the United Nations Security Council on Monday. Well, it's going to be an interesting conversation because a lot has been talked about on this particular matter, and of course a lot of concerns, some skepticism, but also in terms of the diplomatic ramification. Well, I have a fantastic panel with me this evening. Allow me to introduce them to you. Dr. Edgar Githo is also joining us, international affairs, security and diplomacy expert. A very good evening to you. Karibu sana. We also do have Gail Caster, human rights defender. She is Haitian and the executive director of Se Farm Foundation. I hope I pronounced that correctly. A very good evening to you and welcome to Kenya.
Thank you.
Indeed. And Nasongo Muliro, who's a foreign policy and security specialist from Glosseps. A very good evening to you, Bona Muliro. Good to see you away from the mornings, yes, now evening.
Thank you.
And joining us virtually is Professor Macharia Munene, historian and international relations expert as well. Thank you, Prof, for joining us in this conversation. And before we get to just touch on the most important issues, I want us to listen into some of the things that have been said with regard to this particular mission.
Le quotidien du peuple haïtien est pénible.
The daily lives of the people of Haiti is very difficult. This is why the Security Council, which has the power and the necessary authority under Chapter 7 of the Charter, must take urgent action by authorizing the deployment of a multinational support mission to underpin security in Haiti, consisting of both police and military.
À composante policière et militaire pour aider la.
It has now reached a critical point with the deterioration of the security situation on a daily basis. People are facing violent attacks by armed gangs which control various areas in the capital and some provincial towns. They murder, pillage and rape with a rare cruelty. The abuses and the systematic human rights violations caused by gang violence jeopardize the peace, stability and security of the country and the region.
Avec une rare cruauté.
This mission is a fundamental intervention to provide the necessary conditions for Haiti to consolidate its development and governance. For us in Kenya, this mission is of a special significance and critical urgency. We experienced the harrowing brunt of colonialism, as well as the long, difficult, and frustrating struggle for freedom against those that can influence international institutions to frustrate justice. In our struggle, we always had friends, not an overwhelming multitude of powerful allies, yet nevertheless, true, loyal, and determined friends. The people of Haiti, our dear friends, today stand in need. It is our fundamental moral obligation to be their friend indeed by standing with them.
All right, and of course, reports indicate that about 80% of Haiti is controlled by gangs at this point. According to a report by the UN, there's already a recorded 3,000 homicides so far and more than 1,500 kidnappings for ransom between January and September just this year, according to that report by the United Nations. But let me begin with you, Gail. Maybe just paint for us a picture of the situation in Haiti at this point.
Thank you for having me in this panel. It's a pleasure and an honor to be among those giants in the community of Kenya. Let me start saying the situation is critical. We have an invasion of almost 200 plus gangs now that are in different areas and neighborhoods of Haiti. So it's very difficult for the day-to-day Haitians to move around. And the situation is getting worse every day because more guns are getting into the country, and the more guns they have, the more power they have, the more territory they control. So we at this point where the Haitians are frustrated, overwhelmed, because when, as you said before, there's a lot of kidnappings, a lot of rapes, a lot of murders that's been happening. And with this current government that we haven't seen any willingness or pressure to really change things. It's always been a sort of a dormant type of political game, where even when the people are crying or begging for the help, it's very, very rare that you see the police get involved and act. And talking about the police compared to the gangs, like you already know, they are in minority. We have about 9,000, and I'm kind of skeptical on that number, because we have the Biden programs where a lot of them has joined and has left the country. So we do not have the capacity of police, national police, that we need. The gangs are outnumbered. They are armed to the T with AK-47, rockets, you name it, they have it.
Extremely sophisticated.
Exactly.
Right.
They have much more gadgets than the police national can have. So it is not a simple task.
It's not looking very good.
It is not,
all right.
unfortunately.
And I mean, Dr. Gidua, when you listen to that, you know, it begs the question, how did Haiti find itself in this position? Right.
Yeah, thanks, Zainab. Haiti finds itself in this position because of the assassination of their president, Moise, some years back, and that left a power vacuum. So with the current prime minister, who's technically running a caretaker government, he does not have the legitimacy that, you know, the country requires. And part of the agitation of these gangs is feeling that he's there illegally in power, all right? They do not recognize his power. So they found themselves, so he's found himself, already Haiti was undergoing its own economic problems before that. But now, seeing that he has come in at a time when Haiti has a lot of problems, these gangs have taken advantage of just the fact that there's no public confidence in his government, and the ill-equipped police force, like what Gael has just talked about. So these gangs have always been there, but probably in smaller scales, but now have been emboldened by that security vacuum that has been created.
Do you believe there is an ideology that is driving these gangs, or is it just simply the situation that surrounds the economy, perhaps this situation that, you know, hurts the security of that country, that really, you know, is the main reason?
Well, of course, those gangs definitely are coming in saying they are not, they don't have confidence that the government is going to change anything much in their society and all that. And if we try and look at when we have this structural violence, because that's what probably we are experiencing, and we have this rich-poor divide coming in, definitely these gangs are stepping in to say, you know, coming from the less privileged quarters of society, trying to just claw and get relevance for themselves because of many failed socioeconomic programs that past governments have not been able to institute, and this current prime minister is not being able to do because he doesn't have the legitimacy. So if you're talking about ideology, it's more of they feel he's a Western puppet, he's being propped up. That's why they're clamoring for his exit and for his ouster. All right,
yeah. And we'll come back talk about the issue of you know, his credibility in Haiti. Okay. But Muliro, just looking at that, you know, the sense of urgency. Why is there that level of urgency really to send you know, security support to Haiti?
Thank you very much, Zainab. I would say this, you know, listening to my colleagues, it just crossed my mind, and I'm looking, you know, from the perspective of humanity as an African. And I'm looking at the Haiti society, and I remember when we teach students, when we teach them Pan-Africanism, we say Haiti, Ethiopia, and Liberia were the states of concern in joining Africa. And, you know, you look back, Zainab, before I come to your question, and you look at a community of people brutalized, you know, from the story of slavery, the way the president talked, to very violent invasions from outside. And that is systematic weakening of the state. You know, it's not something that we can say, it links to your question. You can say it is spontaneous. You know, this is something that has grown for a long time, that you weaken a state. Then you have a system of like ungoverned space, you know, an open space where the government has no effective control. So what will the people do? People are normally not, passive victims of poor governance or disorder. They have a way in which they try to cope with the disorder. And one of them, you'll find that even as we say they are violent gangs, because I remember in Somalia when we were calling them the Islamic Courts Union, it was just something like maybe Mungiki coming up to create some small order where the state does not exist. And therefore you can see it has grown to a level that now, when we struggle, especially the international community wants to restore a state that looks like them, now it becomes a problem because you have weakened that state for a long time. Right. So it is not an issue that we can say two things very fast, that there is urgency. Actually, it should have been like many years ago when the system started rotting.
But we've seen
But
that.
now the urgency is high because the international system is greatly more closed and intensive. We are village. So we cannot now say that is Haiti, let it rot on its own. The rot in Haiti will spread to the whole world.
And I want you to hold on to that thought. And then Prof will come to you as well to hear your thoughts. But we have to very quickly take a quick break here on Front and Center NTV tonight. A very short one. The hashtag we're using is Front and Center. Talk to us at NTV Kenya. Zainab Ismail will be back in a moment.
Oya Kadere, tuende sasa. Na uende pole pole uchunga watu wa nduthi na watu wa miguu. Na hiyo simu weka chini wewe. Sawa? Kaende sana.
Usalama barabarani ni jukumu letu sote. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwako na NTSA kwa ushirikiano na the European Union.
Hi there, my name is George Washuri, CEO Optiven Group, and I'm very excited to introduce Ushidi Gardens Nakuru. This property is developed by Optiven, and we are doing compacted maram roads. We plant the trees, fence the property. What's unique about this property? It's only 1.2 kilometers off the highway and 18 minutes from Nakuru City, the pink city. So please call this number 0790 300 300. Optiven, we have you covered. Optiven, Optiven, you know I shine bright.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Front and Center here on NTV tonight as we canvass around the Haiti mission and, of course, Kenya's leading that UN-backed mission promising to send 1,000 of its police officers there. Well, Professor Macharia Munene, let me bring you into this conversation. We've already gotten some sense of really what the situation is for the lives of the people of Haiti at this point. Not a very clean picture. But, this situation, it's not a new one. I mean, we've seen the institutional collapse in Haiti. Didn't just happen the other day. It has been there for decades. Just talk to us about that and where Haiti finds itself, in terms of the security situation it's facing.
Thank you very much. The situation in Haiti is unfortunate, it's dire, but it also raises the question of why now? What is going on? Because what is going on there is not something that started yesterday or last month or last year. Haiti has been in very precarious condition for some time. But there seems to be now a special urgency to the situation. And it is not simply a Haitian issue alone. It's got some bigger dimensions, it appears. And as a player in the geopolitical competition for influence, Haiti would appear to be a pawn in this endeavor. And it appears to me that what is seemingly urgent is a diversion from the mess in the Russia-Ukraine theater, which had been dominating news all over. So it looks as if this is one of those diversions So we can talk about some serious problems in another area, because the Ukraine-Russia is not going very well for everybody. They're having serious problems. So if you have another area that also needs attention, then it makes sense. And what has happened in the last few days or so is that there's more attention to Haiti and its challenges than to Europeans killing themselves in Russia, Ukraine.
But,
so
but Prof,
it does apply that.
But Prof, that doesn't negate the fact that the situation in Haiti remains as serious as it is at this point. So is it just a matter of changing the perception, changing the outlook just to create a diversionary narrative? Is that what you're saying it is?
Not necessarily that it's just a diversion. Yes, Haiti has a lot of problems. For the last 200 or so years, it has been having problems. Haiti is a bad example. Right from the beginning, it was a bad example that needed to be contained. And containing it is to keep it poor and underdeveloped, so that some people, particularly former slaves in the slave countries, do not get ideas of trying to declare themselves to be independent the way Haiti did. Mm-hmm. And over the time, we've seen questionable behavior, occupations, the UN even sending troops there, mm-hmm. Who turned out to be bad in their behavior and accused of spreading cholera and rapes and all those kind of things. We've seen big powers go in there to try and contain and not do a very good job. The US sent 20,000 troops in 1994. Brazil sent 13,000 in 2004. And you have, when the UN went there, it went in a confused manner. So Haiti is a very unfortunate little country. Mm-hmm. It occupies about a third of an island, because the Dominican Republic has the other 2/3 or something, almost 2/3. Tiny little place, but the main feature about it is that most of the people are black. And sometimes black people are despised, they are not wanted, despite the rhetoric that we have. If it is true that the Biden administration has decided or suggested deporting Haitian migrants from the US, it's a very interesting development. Mm-hmm. And then we have this crisis coming up at this time. The ambassador who had been appointed by Biden resigned in protest because things were not going as he thought they should. So there are a lot of issues that we need to examine before we say it is this or that.
All right.
Because it's tricky.
Mm-hmm. And I hear you. I mean, it brings about the question of the complexity of the situation. Then, of course, there's been the issue of the hand of the U.S. in terms of this whole mission that is yet to start. With all this, the urgency and the skepticism as well around Kenya's participation, there have been concerns. There was a statement that was made today by human rights activists from here in Kenya, as well as I believe Gael was part of it. If we can just have a look at that, then we continue.
So we need to figure out how Kenyans sees the work that they will be doing align with what the Haitian people want. Because like we said,
I so apologize for that, just a slight sound hitch there, but once we get it, we're going to play that. But Gael, you've listened to all those things. I mean, so many issues coming out, quite complex, in nature. It's not just, a black and white situation in Haiti. But then with this skepticism that now surrounds the deployment of the Kenyan police officers to Haiti, what do you think is causing this situation?
It's like the professor says that, in several of the panelists said, it's not the first time. We have seen this repeated over and over again. 2004, we had 20,000 troops. We had the Brazilian that led the MINUSTAH to go to Haiti. They left babies. They left, you know, cholera that we are still dealing with right now in the country. So it's always been they sending help, help, help. But is it the help that we need? Is it really what we have asked for? Or are they listening to us, really? It's just, it looks like we have been receiving a lot of bandage solutions to the type of disease that we have, but at every time it's getting bigger and bigger. So that's where
the wound continues to fester.
Exactly.
But sending missions to Haiti, you know, security deployments there is more like just, you know, creating a quick fix.
Exactly.
But
and
not
it's
really
never
addressing the structural issues that exist there.
correctly. Like for this mission, if you read the resolution, it says something about protecting some facilities and then structures.
Correct.
What does that mean? What about the Haitians? What you understand? And even the steps taking for this mission is kind of curious to look, because they went to Haiti. There was a convoy that went to Haiti that didn't have time to interact with anyone. They were accompanied by the police. They went and saw the prime minister, and then they left. And you want to bring a solution, but you're not talking to us. So how are we repeating the same thing? And that's the question.
All right, Dr. Githua, what sense do you make of it with you know, that situation where we believe, or some believe, that, you know, by sending these troops from Kenya and other 11 nations as well who've you know, made that decision to send their troops as well as part of this mission, that it is not really the solution that Haiti needs at this point?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Zainab, for your question. In my view, and listening to Gael talking, and especially from, you know, that heartfelt position the way she's voiced it, Haiti, the world needs to listen to the Haitians themselves, to the citizens and what they require. But from a post-conflict reconstruction perspective, because you're trying to reconstruct this society, trying to reconstruct this country,
right,
the first pillar is security. So regardless of what people say, from where I sit, we need to deal with the security situation. So in my view, sending these soldiers is in the right step, because you want to try and find out, can we create an environment that, number one, secures the country, secures the citizens. So my hope is that these 11 nations, Kenya being the forerunner, once we get our 1,000 soldiers inside there, and these other countries quickly contribute their troops, we will create a buffer, kind of, a security force that will try and, number one, understand the terrain and systematically try and provide security. Without the security pillar, you can't talk about socioeconomic problems, you can't talk about the governance issues, you can't rebuild this country because people are still not safe. I was reading in the papers that close to over 14,000 people have, you know, been chased from their homes by these gangs. Now, if you can't contain those gangs, if we do not try and contain those gangs and probably try and disarm them, people will not feel safe to come back to their societies. So the security pillar has to be dealt with, in my view, and someone has to start. So
you're saying this is the right move, that Kenya is actually leading this. But then I remember some of the statements that were coming from stakeholders in that country is the issue, and you can correct me, Gael, is the issue, first of all, a very simple thing, which is a language barrier. There's a cultural barrier as well. So the native language there is French, and then you have now Creole. I mean, how would they be able to, for example, in Port-au-Prince, how would they be able to you know, pinpoint this, you know, target these particular perpetrators and weaponize them?
Yeah, thanks. I believe Kenyans are going there to work with the Haitian police force. That is ideally how it should work. Because of this language barrier, we will have our 1,000 police officers embedded with some Haitian security forces.
With the local forces.
With the local forces. So the local forces will navigate the language barrier issue, will navigate issues of intelligence and the terrain, because the Kenyan policemen do not know which violent gang exists where, and the local nuances and culture. So we would have our police forces in small groups, small battalions, with Haitian policemen guiding them. So we are just there to kind of provide backup and provide a bit of muscle, so to speak. And then it will be the Haitians will be telling us, this is where we have a problem, and we try and step in. Kenya cannot presume to go there and take charge and lead in a place where, number one, like you rightly said, we have a language barrier. We have a deficit of intelligence in terms of knowing the terrain, the culture, the nuances among that society. So we will need to be embedded. We will go there to provide a strong arm, but we will be the strong arm, but they will be the glove reaching into their society, because they understand their language. They've dealt with these gangs before. They know who are the gang leaders, which are the notorious gangs. So we are playing a prominent back role. That, in my view, that is the way to approach it. But the security pillar needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, we will go around in circles. We will not accomplish anything. We will be there for a year, and we will walk out and leave the society just as we found it. Yeah.
I see you don't agree, and I'll come back to you, Gail. I'll come back to you on that matter. But yes, Bwana Muliro, with that, so, you know, Dr. Githua says we would be able to sort of complement the local forces there who've been overrun by these more than 200, you know, gangs that are really terrorizing residents there. And then there is the issue of now what Gail also brought up, sophistication of weapons. I understand about 500,000 illegal guns circulating in Haiti, coming from the U.S.
You know, actually, I took time. I've seen what I was calling elite conjecture and the social media and main media perspectives on Haiti. We're all speaking from this perspective because at least we are specialized like Doc here, and we've been following it, you're interested. But there are other perspectives we may not have captured. And this perspective is what she has raised. One of the issues I was trying to, in the article I was writing, is this mission will have to be different from the other missions. For two reasons. One is actually, as he says, is a multinational security support. But most of us are speaking from the traditional peacekeeping. There is no peace there. You know, peacekeeping is more political process. But this is a system that we are looking at members of the community trying to cope with the absence of government control or government services in terms of security. And in doing that, then we have groups that now begin, you know, arming themselves and group rivalry and harming the citizens. But I would want to begin what she said. I think this mission, before we even deploy it, we must first create a framework of community-based countering of gangs in that place. How do we have it in the sense that for many years we struggled with the military, the war against terrorism, and we failed. But when we went back to what she just mentioned, to look at what do people want, the people you're going to help, and that is what we call the community-based countering of terrorism.
But
can we have that community perspective towards the security in Haiti? Because, okay, maybe you can say then I can just collect my thoughts and come back.
Correct.
Yes.
What you bring up the issue of community-based sort of organizations to counter these gangs.
Approach, actually.
An approach.
Yes.
But what we've seen as well is, you know, the situation has prompted the rise of what is known as Vigilante Movement as well, which, by the way, is retaliating against these gangs in a similar brutal manner, which then doesn't create a really conducive environment even for those innocent civilians who just want to stay in peace.
Actually, you are even adding more weight to my thoughts, because when I say community is what I'm saying. First, you know, you don't come top down, that you know everything, you are the US, you what, this is the solution. That's why I think he's right to look at that and say, have you asked the communities, what are their challenges, why are they also forming their own groups to resist these gangs? And that brings me to an agreement with Doc here that maybe if we give a chance to this multinational security support, give a chance to the Kenya police, there will be a change in this sense. That one, the psychology of gangs is not the psychology of what interventions have been dealing with. the idea of a rebel movement, you know, it has an ideology. You are struggling politically and people support. The idea of terrorists, they have an ideology, insurgents. But the idea of gangs, and they're giving it that name, is what I keep on repeating, that wherever, even the Kenyan side, when there was, in some slum areas, there was absence of effective services and control from the government, the people themselves, in their own, you start, you know, slowly, a small group escorting, protecting their group there. A small group starts now asking them for money to give them protection and some form of order. And with that, they reach a level where it is now an economic enterprise, you know, the gangs. So therefore, it reaches where, if you look at the gang nature in the world all over, you'll find that it is around one person, and it's normally driven by economic agendas that are always, always harmful to the common people that they pretend they're working. And in most cases, you'll find they break away from those people. And we are seeing it in Haiti. And I think that's why you are right, that for observers, this is actually what some people call maybe the ripe moment for Haiti. That the people have been watching, but the people themselves have said now, let's die and live. You know, these gangs are not serving us. So this is the right time for us to go in and ask these people that we want to work with you. Even those gangs, you know, it's not a different thing like we keep on asking ourselves, foreign fighters in, you know, the terrorists. These are children of Haitians.
All right.
Gang system begins with that. Solidarity, hanging there, breaking of families. You know, remember there is a society of long-time slavery, cruelty, like Prof said. You know, the idea of, I'm seeing that element there. You do not, when we are looking at issues of Pan-Africanism, it was 1900, I think in London, if I'm not sure, Manchester, the discussion centered around the independent countries with African origin that were now under threat. At that time, most of the African states were not independent, but that was Ethiopia, Haiti, and Liberia. So there is that feeling that Professor Mnene was bringing out, the feeling that we don't want this show from a black dominated, that we can be independent and manage ourselves. By the way, in just looking at Haiti, I read somewhere and realized that it was actually called the jewel in that region. Yes. The jewel of the Caribbean there, because you're the richest, richer than France. So you ask yourself, and at that time, you know, their leader, black, you know, countries led by blacks, we were happy about that, And their leader came up with the idea of no foreigner can own land, isn't it? Yes. Brutalized community for a long time.
All right.
And therefore, that's why I think, Zainab, it doesn't mean that you are going, the approach of the one we have used against terrorism, you know, that how can the community work with the security forces to change the system of security should be used against these gangs because they are part of that community. And I think I agree with that security first, actually at this time.
All right.
Security first.
All right. And you talked about, of course, the first black independent country in the world. So that is something to look at. But we have to take another break. When we come back, Prof, I'll get to you and we'll continue this conversation. Talk to us. The hashtag is Front and Center.
A perfect family is not always what it seems.
Hapa hakuna mtu anaweza kunificha kitu.
The War of Succession is on. Inca Siri starts October 9. Only on Maisha Magic Plus channel 163 on DSTV, GoTV channel 3.
Welcome to Indeed Kenya, coinciding with Manufacturing Expo 2023. Grab the opportunity to meet over 80 Indian manufacturers in various industries: oil and gas, power energy, solar, chemical, food processing, agro, packaging machinery, automotive and construction. We're at KICC, Nairobi. Mark your calendar from 11th to 13th October from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
From the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Kenyan workers represent an important segment in Saudi Arabia.
Understanding Saudi Arabia's labor market. We today have over 120,000 Kenyan domestic workers. The males are mainly in the private sector.
The opportunities, the regulations, the do's and don'ts.
Maisha Saudi ni sheria.
And what is being done to ensure worker welfare and protection.
We have more than 800 inspectors. We conduct over 1 million field visits.
Plus, the role being played by the Kenyan government back home.
We are in the process of negotiating a higher minimum wage for domestic workers coming from Kenya.
Mortain Doom, with its trusted formulation, it provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortain Doom message of how you and I can fight to end malaria. Mortain Doom, Kenya's #1 choice.
NTV inavuka tena misitu na nyika, milima na mabonde. Safari hii ni kaunti nambari 25. Safari yako kwenda Samburu. From the wildlife conservancies in the east to the infamous Suguta Valley to the north.
Karibuni NTV Samburu County.
And you get to experience the only international camel derby in the region.
Samburu culture is the best in the world. Come, we celebrate our culture.
Tutatua, kupakua uhondo, mila na tamaduni zake.
Margaret Kimathi,
Ruth Sarmui, Sydney Chazima, Samburu County Camel Derby Edition. Na jarida la ngamia. This weekend on the 6th, 7th and 8th. Only on NTV.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Front and Center NTV tonight as we take a look at the situation in Haiti and, of course, the deployment of Kenyan troops that will lead the mission there to be able to restore stability in that country. Professor Macharia Munene, just to bring you in, 13 members of the UNSC, that's the United Nations Security Council, voted in favor of this resolution. However, we do have some members of that council that did not support this particular mission, and they decided to abstain from that particular vote. That is Russia and China as well. Looking at that, does that influence in any way the perception that this mission will be undertaking in Haiti? All right, Prof. So, Prof, we cannot be able to hear you yet. I think you have to... Yes, now we can hear you, Prof. Yes. So looking at that, I mean, especially on the issue of, the perception, does this particular issue going to hurt or influence, the mission in any way?
No, the abstention by Russia and China will not affect the intended operation. All that China and Russia did was to say, they have observed. It is not vital to their interests. If the African country and others think they should get themselves involved in that, that's their problem, as prompted by the United States. But Russia and China, it's not their vital interests. They did not want to support the mission. And at the same time, they didn't want to oppose it, because for them to oppose would mean a veto. And they were not interested in doing some veto on this particular one.
Right.
Given that they see the sentiment, so the abstention will not affect the operations, the intended operations of the team going to Haiti. What will affect the operations is the attitude that those who are going there have, the facilities, the preparation, what kind of preparation they're going to have. And it is not going to be an easy walk into the place, given that some of those people have expressed concern, reservations, and they actually welcome Kenya's presence so that they can engage in not a very polite way. And given the reality on the ground, as we understand it, 1,000 police officers is negligible. They're not going to do anything. Given that when you have like that former police officer, the one called Barbecue, and so I understand he has 20,000 people behind him, fully armed properly. So how do we engage those kind of people? There's better thinking that needs to be brought forth if the implementation is going to take place. It appears as if this is a political game that involves the President of the United States and the President of the Republic of Kenya. And the Americans themselves don't want to be in it. Given they say they'll support, they'll give money, financial support,
they have pledged
logistical
$100 million, yes.
But that's peanuts for the task that's coming up. I think somewhere they might say it's 200 million, but comparatively for a year, that is, it's not serious. So you get the impression that this project, from its inception, it is not serious because the expectations are something else.
All right.
So I think, in my view, I think Kenya made a mistake in this regard, and it needs to rethink the whole thing because it was not properly rethought. I think it was Chief Justice William Mutunga who complained that there was no public participation. There is also questions as to whether the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was properly involved in coming up with this thing, or the National Security Council. We have a National Security Council, so we don't know what advice did they give, if they gave an advice, and was it accepted or rejected? Because there are three centers that help to make policy in Kenya.
All right.
One is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the other one is National Security Council, and the third one is the State House. So did these three organs consult, or whatever it is? We have our neighbors in Tanzania and Uganda. I don't think they are very excited about the whole thing because it's questionable what's going on. So I think there is that strong feeling that Kenya made a mistake, or the President Ruto made a mistake in this. And if he did it on his own without good advice or consulting his team, then he's finding himself in a fix. Actually, he is in a fix if these things don't go as explained.
Okay. So that's where, Prof, you stand in terms of that. You believe that this was a mistake and a decision that wasn't necessary by the government at this point. I'm going to hear from Dr. Githua and Muliro on that. Perhaps you can just keep that in mind. But Gael, let me get back to you. I know you also wanted to respond to the issue of what Dr. Githua had said in terms of, the complementing of our forces together with the local forces there. But also, I think another significant challenge to this particular matter is the political environment in Haiti itself. You mentioned just a little bit earlier on in terms of the Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, who really his credibility, I think, has come to question as well. So what does that mean for Kenya leading this mission into that country that there's already this political turmoil?
One thing I know is that if I have question on the host that is hosting me, I have to clear that first before I can trust that host with my life. That would be me. However, I understand the desire for the Kenyan community to help our brothers and sisters in Haiti, and I appreciate and I'm honored for that. But I think, like the professor said, we are jumping the gun too fast. We have to look at the reality in depth and understand what it is that our Kenyan men and women will be stepping to. Like we said, there is questions around the Prime Minister because his name is cited on the murder of our late President Jovenel Moise. And he has credibility issue because he seems like to be doing things that are not supposed to be doing in the steps that, and for the past 2 years, for example, there's no concrete decisions or any interventions that show his willingness to get these things under control.
Do we have an executive or a political structure in Haiti at this point? Because I know the Prime Minister was not voted in by the people, but we have, an executive in place, legislative, judiciary.
Yeah, we do not have any. Unfortunately, all of them are, I think their times have come up. We don't have no parliament. We don't have no senators, deputies. We did have some coalitions that came up with different, we have September 11 coalitions where we had several political groups and some part of the civil social society that came together and did some sort of agreement. We have another agreement, the agreement of Montana for August 30th. These are proposals of ways to get out of this crisis, but we do not have any other institutions or judiciary or justice type of institutions that can, face our Prime Minister at this moment.
Dr. Githua, let me go back to what Professor Mashari had mentioned, that he does not have confidence in this particular matter. I believe, Prof, you said that, and that this was not the right decision that the government has undertaken. What's your stance on that?
No, my view is this is going to be a complicated mission. I want to look at the glass as half full, all right? This is a David and Goliath situation. We are the Davids, okay? So we are going in there. We're a small country. We may not have had the most funding. We don't have the best police force in the world. But we had this call for help from Haiti, and Kenya decided to answer. Now, having said that, we can turn the optics, as complicated and as hard as that mission is going to be. There are certain things we can do in terms of our force posture and mission preparedness to try and ensure that we try and succeed in the role that we're given. Number one is, who are we going to send? Kenya has specialized police units that have this kind of training to deal with this kind of, to handle this kind of combat or this kind of situation. So for me, my advice would be now, instead of now laying blame on whether we should have gone in or not, and now that we are committed and the die is cast, let us prepare our soldiers, the force that will go. Let the Kenyan government seriously vet who we are going to send there. We do not want to send police officers who have been tainted here in Kenya with either past corruption issues or being brutal to citizens or have been caught in any kind of scandals. Two, we want to make sure that we send properly trained soldiers, the ones who come from these specialized units, meaning they need to be combat ready, they need to be combat prepared, they need to know what kind of terrain they are walking into. I don't know whether we have experienced anything that would prepare us for this kind of gang violence. Then, and I know now this is the hot potato, the tendency in peacekeeping missions world over to be tainted by the soldiers who get sent are not sent based on competence, but because of who they know or who fronted their name. So we want to avoid sending Kenyan soldiers or Kenyan police officers because they have a godfather somewhere or because they know someone big who vouched for their name and removed a competent soldier. If we send a ragtag team of incompetent people, they're going to come back in body bags. But if we send a team that is vetted, the Inspector General and his 2 deputy IGs, the GSU commandant, need to sit down and come up with a list of people who they honestly believe can handle this. And then, given this $100 million, $200 million from the US, we up our game in terms of equipment. In Haiti, we are going to meet gangs that are using 50 cal machine guns. We're going to meet people with squad action weapons. We're going to find all these, advanced weaponry. We need to be prepared. Our force posture, then we can turn this David and Goliath mission into actually David slaying Goliath. Otherwise, if we do not work backwards in vetting the policemen we are going to send, this is a mission that is dead on arrival. Yeah, but if we try and do that, we will try and at least reduce incidences of casualties, and we will, of course, get a measure of success. And then also piggybacking and borrowing on what Prof Muliro was talking about, we go there with a different approach in terms of trying to involve the community and trying to show them a different face from the Haitian policemen. I've heard Gael talking about how Haitians don't trust their police force because their police force is corrupt and some gang members have infiltrated the police force. So why can't the Kenyan police force at least try and go and win the hearts and minds of the Haitians and try using that community-based approach to try and make it successful? But from Kenya's side, let us send the right soldiers. Let's send the right.
But you're saying this is the right decision. This is a decision that, you know, should have been made, according to you.
I'm a firm believer in what we call the rational actor model. States make rational decisions.
All right.
By the time Kenya made that decision, they had done their cost-benefit analysis and said this is the right decision. So now we all have to fall in line with that decision.
All right.
So we prepare ourselves with the right soldiers. Let's go and do this.
Let me hear from Bonamliro on that.
Yes, Zainab, I think I would want to just speak from the tone of your question to Doc there, the last part, whether you think is the right decision, and I think he answered you. I want to look at this in terms of foreign policy. You know, states pursue their interests, and when you are in the international system, you are smelling around for any opportunity. And then the other part there, states also cheat other states. But then for purposes of Kenya's image, now not looking at the perspective of Haiti itself, from the side of Kenya, Kenya saw an opportunity in terms of their foreign policy to project their image, to indicate to global powers that run the global governance that we are ready to be an ally of the global powers in the region, and we have done our part in the region, we can do it across. And this is based on, if you listen to the president's speech, he wasn't addressing even Kenyans. He wasn't addressing the world leaders. He was addressing an ordinary person in Haiti. He was calling them our dear friends. He was questioning the idea of Pan-Africanism. He talked about the AU principle of solidarity with Africans in the diaspora. He cited the ideas of colonialism purposely for the purposes of doing what we are saying, win the hearts and minds of the Haitians first, then now make the other step. And for me,
so don't you?
Yes. Yes,
sorry to cut you off, but don't you see perhaps Prof's argument that Kenya might find itself as you know, a pawn in a geopolitical game that is being played by major political players in this world?
Yes, in international relations, foreign policy, all states that are not global powers must always be ready for this perspective, that to look for an opportunity where even when they are used, they'll get their perspective.
Right.
Because that's why we are not called global powers. We can't play. We are all, small states are pawns in this geopolitics of the global powers. But how do you align yourself as you struggle to climb to that level? Even China began there.
Right.
It's there. So for me, I think Kenya saw an opportunity to project its image.
Okay.
One, as a champion of African affairs. Number two, as a champion of the blacks in the diaspora. And then number three, we are looking at the perspective of, if you observed well, when Embakasi, they called for recruitment of people from not just ordinary Kenyans, but the group we have trained, National Youth Service, to come and recruit a few. How many people did you see there?
7,000.
So it is a very pragmatic perspective of a country to always look for such opportunities, to exploit them for the purposes of correcting what is domestically great pressure. And for me, just to close this, my friend, for me, I think, as Prof says, I think it's not just some spontaneous one-man decision. You wake up in the morning and you say, me as a person, I think we should do this. It is something that is heavily well thought out, and as we try to help Haiti, there is a greater decision in terms of rational actor for Kenya in this.
All right. Prof, I'll just give you less than a minute to just make your winding remarks on this matter, because we're almost out of time, and especially touching on that issue of the governance issues that really is facing Haiti at this point. And of course, I had somebody say in this conversation at some point that even if you send 200,000 police officers, even if you send from Pakistan or from Uganda or from Zanzibar or from Zimbabwe, they will still not be able to really solve the governance issues that faces Haiti.
It's true, the governance challenge is a big one and difficult to deal with. Ultimately, it's a Haitian internal problem that might need some well-calculated assistance. I just feel that Kenya went about it the wrong way in this particular instance.
Okay.
To the extent that it appears as if you are engaging what para-diplomacy, where we go to be the supervisor on behalf of some other force in a very tricky situation.
All right.
It needs serious rethinking by all people that are concerned. And it is not to doubt that the president is genuine in his intentions, which is okay, but that doesn't mean that he's right.
Doesn't mean he's right. Dr. Gidua, less than a minute, please.
Thank you, Zainab. My view is we're in the swimming pool. We're in the deep end. Can we swim? It's too late to back out. I still insist that there's a chance for Kenya to do something good for Haiti. And I like the way Prof Muliro put it. Kenya saw an opportunity. Let's see what this opportunity does for us, because I'm imagining with that kind of support that the American government is going to give, it means Kenya stands an opportunity to also help improve its security sector. This will be a learning space for us as well. We will go there, God willing, survive the 1 year. The mandate that's been given, we'll be there for 1 year. We'll come back with lessons. We'll have a better police force, and we'll have better equipment also for ourselves.
So you think Kenya stands to gain from this particular mission?
We also stand to gain from it. As negative as critics want to put it, we stand to gain from it.
All right. Yeah. I'll get you, Gail, because I want you to get the last word. Muliro, less than a minute.
Yes, I would say this, that just as a member of this world, and the President talked as a mission of humanity, if we all give up, what will happen to Haiti? That's a question that was asked about Somalia when US packed and left, and UN. The question we were asking in this region. So what happens of poor Africa? So we improvised and moved into Somalia. There are steps that have been made. There were all these stories that actually terrorists will annihilate. The military from Kenya, they said Ugandans don't know even how Mogadishu looks like, language. There we are in an African way, African solutions to African problems.
Right.
Haiti cannot be left to lift itself by its own straps of its own boot.
Right.
Somebody must step forward.
All right.
And for Kenya to step forward, it is killing two birds with one stone.
Okay.
Its own rational interests as a player in the international relations, and actually continuing with its pillar. By the way, the pillar of Kenya is peace diplomacy, projecting its peace diplomacy beyond now Africa. That's how I see it. Let's do something for our own people across the world and see what happens.
All right. Yes. And Gail, as a Haitian, and of course, it must be very painful to see all these things happening in your own home country. Perhaps, the Kenyan-led mission would, from where you stand, do you think it's going to make any difference as you make your winding remarks?
I am hoping that it will. And I think the Kenyans that will be going with a heart of trying to help us. The only thing what I'm saying, and I'm going to repeat it over and over again, this is a Haitian crisis that needs a Haitian solution. All we are asking is that we, the Kenyan community, kind of integrate communities, the Haitian communities, into the solutions. Kind of integrate, any nonprofit organizations and make sure that the human rights is respected, make sure that, we have equality going on. It has to be clear for the Haitian people to embrace, to see where you're coming from, what is the agenda. Because yes, I do have a fear that Kenya may be used as a forefront for some sort of, backdoor type of doing something wrong, which I hope is not, but it feels like it. However, I am standing firm and believe that we Haitians, we can help ourselves. The $100 million, why not invested on structures that could help us doing this? But you invested on somebody else. Now this somebody else that needs to come and sit down on the table with us, drink tea, eat our food, and understand our culture before they can come and clean with us. Because you can't do nothing without connecting with the person.
Indeed.
So connection is important. Yes, we are all Black. Yes, we are happy to have our brothers and sisters coming and leading, but we have had that before. So what is different now?
And that we'll have to wait and see now. We cannot preempt and imagine anything will go different. But of course, Prof also has his own thoughts on really the situation and why this is not the right decision for Kenya, by Kenya at this point. But a quick comment here. So it says, whether the mission succeeds will hinge on not only on the deployed forces' ability to quickly establish peace, but whether or not it can pave the way towards a meaningful and democratic government reset in this historically tumultuous country. And sadly, we hope that is what is going to happen. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dr. Edgar Gidhoa, International Affairs, Security and Diplomacy expert, Gael Castor, Human Rights Defender from Haiti, and also the Executive Director of CEFAM Foundation, and also Nasongo Muliro, Foreign Policy and Security Specialist from GLOSEPS, as well as Professor Masharia Munene, who is joining us virtually, historian and international relations expert. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening as we take a look at this very important discussion, and of course something that we'll continue to watch out as it pans, and of course we'll bring you all the developments from this particular matter. Well, this is where we wind up on Front and Center NTV tonight. Thank you so much for your valued company. Let's continue having this conversation online. The hashtag, as always, is Front and Center at Zainab Ismail. At NTV Kenya, have yourself a lovely Thursday evening. Good night.